Hello, my name is Shelley with the Salt Creek Patchmakers Quilt Guild. And if you're watching this video, you're either thinking about entering a quilt into our show or you've already entered a quilt into our show. And thus you've seen on the back of our entry form that we do require a sleeve for hanging your quilt. We are a small but mighty guild, and a sleeve on the back of the quilt makes it so much easier just to slide that quilt up there and hang it up. And so I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to put sleeves on your quilt. Don't be intimidated by it at all. Now then, if your quilt is 60 inches wide or larger, we require a 4-inch sleeve. That means starting with a 9.5-inch piece of fabric, and then you would fold it in half and put a 1/4-inch seam on it, and that's all you would need to do. I used ugly fabric because I don't care what the sleeve looks like. We're not an international quilt show. We just need something for the ease of hanging. What you do then is you put the seam to the back. You don't even have to turn it inside out. And we prefer the seam to the back because that's the weakest point on the sleeve. And that way, if something did happen where there was pressure applied to your quilt, that seam wouldn't pop, and the stitching that is holding your sleeve on would secure the sleeve still and keep your quilt safe on the rack. So you can put your sleeve at the top of the quilt if your quilt is less than 8 feet tall, because that's how tall our racks are. Now then, if it is longer than 8 feet, we need you to measure up 88 inches from the bottom, and that way your quilt is not touching the floor. We have people with small children and walkers and other biped humanoids that don't know where their feet are placed, and we don't want them standing on your quilt. So that's why we prefer to have the top hanging over the top of the rod. However, if you have a very large quilt, you may need to drop the sleeve down and use safety pins to pin the bottom up also. If you have an existing sleeve on your quilt, that's okay. And if your quilt is longer than 8 feet, then just pin up the bottom with safety pins for us. We would greatly appreciate that. So when you're doing that, you can put safety pins or just a running stitch or whip stitch on there. Just keep in mind, if you pin the sleeve on, there's usually somebody up on a ladder and somebody on the ground that is feeding a rod. This 2-inch rod through, and it may catch on those pins. And again, we try to be very, very careful with your quilt. So that's just put your pins maybe a little bit closer together so that that rod does not catch on those. And that's for quilts that are 60 inches wide or larger. We also have a rod hanging system for quilts that are less than 60 inches. And those quilts only need a 2-inch sleeve on them because we use a smaller aluminum rod. Again, you can use that same methodology, starting out with a 4.5-inch strip, fold it in half, take a 1/4-inch seam, and then apply it to your quilt, again, with the seam towards the quilt, and you can either whip stitch it down or use safety pins. Now, we do want you to make sure you do need to adhere both sides of the sleeve. If you only adhere one side, then it's probably going to flop up when we thread the rod through. And you want to leave a pooch. Just think about embracing the pooch, not just your dog, but if you leave a gap in the back of the sleeve, that gives plenty of room for that rod to slide through. If you were to flatten that sleeve out completely and then put the pins or the stitching down, that's not going to give the rod enough room to slide through. Also, if you give that pooch on there, that also lets all of the excess size of the rod be on the back of your quilt, and it lets your quilt lay more flatly on the front, which just makes it hang even better in our show. So with that said, there are instructions on the saltcreekpatchmakers.com website that actually list out everything that I have just told you. Please go there under the Quilt Show tab to find those written instructions, and we hope to see your quilt in our show. Thank you.